Hey there folks, welcome back to my channel Expat Nam. Today I'm back in Vinhome's Central Park, a really cool park in the Bintan area of Saigon, and I'm going to talk to you today about working and tax in Vietnam. So maybe you've been offered a job in Vietnam, maybe you're thinking about coming here to do some teaching, taking a bit of time out from your career in another country. Or maybe you just want to come here and see what you can pick up work-wise and see how it goes, guys. So what does it involve working in Vietnam, and what are the potential pitfalls? What is the situation in regards to tax? Let's take a look at these today. So many expats come to Vietnam on an expat package. They're sent here from a different country, and that would include things like flights, accommodation, insurance, and even schooling for children as well. So if you're going to come here from another country, always try and negotiate your salary and your package before you arrive. And I can tell you from what I know, not from my own experience, but from some of my colleagues on the higher end and some of my friends who are managers and directors, the typical package does include 2 flights home a year. It'll include a salary in US dollars, not Vietnamese dong. It may include a TEP bonus, a 13th month salary bonus. Importantly, the salary will be net. So when you negotiate a job in Vietnam, try to negotiate in net, guys, because the tax rates here are unfortunately very, very high. And if you're on a high salary, you'll be paying a lot of tax in Vietnam. So where can you find jobs in Vietnam? Well, the 3 main sites are monster.com, Vietnam Works, and Career Builder, and these cover everything from managerial up to directorship positions, and also cover things like teaching and training as well. Most people will come in on a 3-month business visa, which they will get on arrival at the airport, or their employer will help them to sort out at the embassy in their home country, and they will get that in their passport before they arrive. This will last you for 3 months, guys, and then you'll have to use those 3 months to process your work permit and your TRC, temporary resident card. This does take a long time at the moment, and 3 months is, it's doable, but it may not be doable. So you may find yourself having to leave and re-enter. I mean, you can do that in a few hours by going to Cambodia, or you can fly out to somewhere like Bangkok and come back, depending on what suits you best. So how about the culture of work in Vietnam? Well, Vietnamese is very hardworking, and local staff will tend to work 6 days a week. So it's very common to find people working Monday to Friday, and then Saturday morning, or even all day Saturday, and they'll just have Sunday off. You'll get 12 days holiday typically here, plus public holidays. So another few days for things like Independence Day, things like that. But most foreign companies will give you those 12 days public holidays, plus another 10 or so days. So you're looking at around 30 to 35 days annual leave for a typical expat style job here. Obviously, if you're a teacher working in an international school, you're going to get the summer off. You won't get Easter, but you'll get Christmas, and you're going to be looking at a lot more than 35 days. The culture of work in Vietnam, well, again, nap time. So lunchtime, wherever I've been in Vietnam, everything stops at lunchtime. So whether that's from 11:30 to 12:30, 12 to 1, the lunch hour is sacred here, and there's no kind of staggered lunch hours, which doesn't really make sense to me. It's like everybody goes for lunch at the same time, and then the unit or the office will close, and then everything will start back up then at 1 o'clock when everyone's had their lunch and had a little bit of nap. So I think, it comes from the tradition of people rising very, very early in Vietnam, getting a little bit of sleep at lunchtime, and then going to bed quite early at night. It may seem quite unusual to you if you're coming here in the first instance, like, why is my colleague next to me asleep in the office? But you do get used to it over time, and maybe you'll find yourself taking a nap at lunchtime as well, although I never do because I just can't sleep in an office. What about after work culture here and doing business with different partners, different people, different companies? Well, there's a real culture of entertainment. So drinking and partying and eating goes hand in hand with business deals here. So, perhaps in the UK or in the US, the business deal would be done over the golf course and maybe a couple of beers in the evening. In Vietnam, there would probably be some sort of big dinner at a big expensive restaurant, a lot of alcohol, and alcohol is important here for business deals, and I've heard this from a lot of my Vietnamese friends as well. When all business tends to be done over drinking and eating, it's just a cultural thing, and it's not just Vietnam, it's also Korea and Japan as well. it's kind of a bonding exercise. You know, we get drunk together, maybe we spill a few secrets about each other, we have built up trust together because we've drank together. Now we can do business together, and that's kind of my opinion of what it is, and it is definitely a part of doing any kind of business here. Okay, so what about the tax situation in Vietnam? So unfortunately, Vietnam has very high rates of tax compared to a lot of the world, really, and especially compared to places like Singapore and Hong Kong. So in Vietnam, you're going to be taxed progressively up to 35% if you are considered resident. So what does being considered resident means? Well, that means you're here for more than 6 months of the year, or you have substantial ties here, like a rented property, although that can be a grey area, and I think the test that they mostly use is the 6-month period of time within the country. So you're going to be taxed up to 35% at quite low tax bands if you're here all the year, and I'll leave an infographic on the screen, guys, so you can see what those bands are. If you are non-resident Vietnam, you'll be taxed at a flat rate of 20%. And one thing I will mention, guys, as it's quite important and very unusual, is Vietnam does tax worldwide income. Okay, so it's kind of similar to the US, I believe. If you're a resident here, they will tax you on whatever you earn from any country in the world, which is different to places like the UK and a lot of Europe where taxation is based on residency only. On top of the tax, guys, you're going to be looking at 8% for social insurance, which you will pay. Employers will pay about 17.5% social insurance, and this covers you for kind of a small pension. This is quite a new thing that came out at the start of this year, and a lot of people complained because they were getting deductions of about $80 a month on top of their salary, and it wasn't very clear what the deductions were for, but eventually it was clarified. And this is for social insurance, which is supposedly pays for health care and a pension in Vietnam, and you can withdraw this $80 a month when your work contract finishes. So you're able to go to the local government office and take out this $80 you paid for pension, or you can wait until you're, I think it's 60 for men in Vietnam, wait until you're of the appropriate age and take that pension. Although if you're not still in Vietnam when you're of pensionable age, then I think it's going to be really difficult for you to get that money, because it's really hard to send money outside of Vietnam. And I'll be talking about this in my next video, guys, banking and property. So to work legally in Vietnam, you're going to need a work permit, and this is granted for 1 to 2 years, and they're getting increasingly more and more difficult to get, guys, at the moment. So the official cost of a work permit is 400,000 dong in the north, I think 450,000 in the south. Processing time, well, it's stated as around 21 days, I believe, but this is rarely the case, and with myself it typically takes about 5 to 6 months to get a work permit or work permit renewal. I very recently got my work permit, a new work permit, which is fantastic, although my company really struggled to get it because well, there was just I can't give you a reason really, it was just knocked back multiple times, and you know, very kind of bureaucratic process, which is very frustrating for me and the company. But we got it eventually, which is fantastic. So that means that I have permission to work here legally for another 2 years, I believe. So what do you need to get a work permit in Vietnam? Well, you're going to need sponsorship from a company. So they're going to need a business license, and they're going to need to sponsor you to work. And they're also going to have to complete a lot of information, send this off to Do Lisa, the People's Committee. They're going to have to request and give a very good reason as to why they need to employ a foreign person. And they're also going to have to submit a training plan to show that they're going to train up a local person to be able to do your job once your work permit has finished. And this is a new rule that's come in this year, and it makes things like, for example, native English teachers a little bit more difficult, because obviously it's hard to train up someone to become a native English teacher. So for the work permit, you're going to need a police check. So if you've been in Vietnam for more than 6 months, you're going to have to get a local police check, which is quite cheap. It's around 350,000 Vietnamese dong, and you're going to have to give your addresses and your details of where you've been over the last 6 months. If you're new to the country, then less than 6 months, you're going to have to get a police check from your home country and get that notarized and bring it with you to Vietnam. That's another point I'd like to make, guys. It's really important to get your documents sorted before you come to Vietnam and get them notarized, okay? So translated and notarized at a solicitor and at the consulate or embassy in your home country, because if you come here with your documents, that's great, but if they're not translated or notarized, then you're probably going to have to send them back to your home country, and it's going to be very expensive, because you're going to have to use services like DHL and you're gonna have to use, yeah, trust me, I've heard stories of it costing upwards of $1,000 to do this for a set of documents. So my number one tip today would be to sort out your documents before you come to Vietnam. So on top of your police check to get your work permit, you're going to need a health check, and this is valid for 6 months, I believe, and you can go to pretty much any hospital in Vietnam. Most expats tend to go to private hospitals to get this because it's just a bit quicker and a bit more professional. The cost of this is about 1.5 to 2 million Vietnamese dong, and the employer should pay for this. And that's another point I'd like to add at this time, guys, is really a good employer should be paying for all these costs. They should be paying for work permit fees, resident card fees, health check fees, police check fees, should all be covered by your employer. If your employer is asking you to cover these costs, which they often do, especially with teachers, then that's a little bit of a red flag, and I would be careful and wary about continuing my employment, or starting my employment with them rather. So once you've got your health check and your police check and your documents from work, then they should be able to begin the process of getting a work permit for you. Once you get your work permit, guys, you'll be eligible to get a visa which corresponds to the length of time on your work permit. So typically a work permit will be between 1 and 2 years in length, so you'll be able to then apply for a TRC, which costs, I think it's around $150 for a 2-year TRC and 145 for a 1-year TRC, so not much difference. And this will be your visa whilst you're living in Vietnam. And it's better to have a TRC as opposed to a business visa, because it means you can travel on the TRC domestically, so you can leave your passport at home, and then if you want to travel around Vietnam, just take your TRC with you as photographic ID, and you're away. TRC is very easy to get, takes around 7 to 10 days, and it typically doesn't take much longer than 10 days because all the hard work's done with the work permit. TRC is just confirming what you have on the work permit and that you are eligible to stay in Vietnam. So what about salaries for typical jobs in Vietnam? So let's start with English teaching. So maybe you're going to come here and you're going to do a bit of English teaching in language centers and schools. You're looking at between $1,500 and $2,000 for about 70 hours a month of teaching, but then this may or may not be taxed. You may be paid in cash, you may not get health insurance, you may not get paid holidays. So all these things are negotiable when it comes to teaching, and unfortunately for this type of position, I'm talking about English teaching here, the benefits aren't typically great, and you're better off going for a proper subject teaching position with a teaching license. So if you have a teaching license, for example, and you want to come and teach maths, physics, biology, something like that, you will go to an international school and get a job there, and there you'll be paid probably $3.5 to $4,000 a month. You probably get accommodation paid as well, up to about $700 a month, and you'll also get a flight home once a year. So English teachers not paid too well, but subject teachers, it's a big difference. Normally a 2-year contract as well, and you'll be looked after quite well by the school. Although one of the differences is, I hear from my friends, that English teaching is a much more relaxed job and very little preparation and outside marking, whereas subject teacher, you're kind of locked in for those 2 years. You've got a lot of parents' evenings, a lot of marking, exam preparation to do, and yeah, it's pretty full on. Aside teaching jobs, what else can you do? Well, there's a lot of managerial and directorship type positions here available for expats, especially in manufacturing, sales, fintech, finance. Credit and finance is particularly big now in Vietnam, and is set to grow quite massively over the coming years, as is software development and fintech, the financial scene in general. International banks like Bank of America is planning on coming here, and there really is a big untapped market in Vietnam for credit and financial products, including insurance. So what will you get paid? Well, as a manager in a fintech or banking situation here, you're probably looking at between $3,000 to $4,000 per month, plus typical expat benefits package. If you're moving up to directorship, then you're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 plus, depending on your experience, what you're bringing to the table, and what you can negotiate. These figures are obviously what I've been told from my friends who are in these positions, guys, and what I've researched myself. Obviously, it does vary wildly depending on the position that you're doing and the experience that you have. So finally today then, guys, if you're coming here to work, where are the best places to live? Well, I'm not going to say too much about that because I've done 3 great videos in my opinion about this, so I think the best places are District 7, District 2, District 1, and I'll leave links to my reviews of those areas in the description below. So there we have it, folks. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening today. I hope that gives you some information and puts you in good stead if you're thinking about coming to Vietnam to work. I'll talk to you about tax, and I'll talk to you about the typical salary ranges and jobs that you could find if you were to come here. Thanks guys, have a great day, catch you later.